Hello, everyone. Thank you so much for joining us. Before we begin, I just wanted to introduce the two ASL interpreters that we have today. We have Blair Fell, and we also have Jose as well, if you can see that. And then we will give you instructions in the chat on how to pin their videos moving forward. For Q&A, you can use that function if you have any questions regarding our outreach presentation. And during our public session, you can raise your hand to make a comment or ask another question. Thank you.
All right. Thank you, Yahira. And I want to welcome everyone to the December board meeting of the Civilian Complaint Review Board of the City of New York. Before we, and I'm going to call this meeting to order. Before we go any further, we just have one housekeeping matter we need to take care of, and that is to approve the minutes of the last meeting. May I have a motion to approve those minutes?
Moved.
Is there a second?
Second.
Any additions or revisions to the minutes? Hearing none, all those in favor of the minutes of the prior meeting, please say aye.
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 All those opposed, no. The ayes have it. The minutes are approved. I'd like to ask my fellow board members, co-board members, if they would introduce themselves. I'm going to try to do this on the screen, which jumps around a lot, but I'm going to try not to leave anybody out. So I want to start with Angela Pinsky.
Hi, everyone. My name is Angela Pinsky. I am a mayoral appointee to the CCRB, and I currently reside in Manhattan.
Erica Bond.
Good afternoon. My name is Erica Bond. I'm a mayoral appointee of the CCRB, and I hail from Brooklyn.
Esmeralda Simmons. I think you're muted, Esmeralda.
Okay, got it. Esmeralda Simmons, I'm a public advocates appointee, and I am from Brooklyn.
Frank Dwyer.
Frank Dwyer, Police Commissioner Designee, originally from Brooklyn, resident of Queens now.
John Siegel.
Good afternoon, John Siegel. I'm a practicing attorney and was appointed to this board by Mayor Blasio, and I'm coming to you from my home.
Joseph Puma.
Good afternoon. My name is Joseph Puma. I'm a city council appointee to the board and a lifelong NYCHA resident of Manhattan.
Michael Rivadeneira. Mute, Michael, you are. So can you unmute, Michael? There you go.
Yeah, sorry about that. I'm having broadband issues right now. But Michael Rivadeneira, I am the Bronx designee, the City Council's Bronx designee to the board, and I help on the board.
Right. Nathan Joseph.
Good afternoon. My name is Nathan Joseph. I am a city council designee, and I'm from Staten Island.
Sal Carcaterra.
Good afternoon, everyone. I'm Sal Carcaterra. I'm a police commissioner designee to the board, and I reside on Staten Island.
Willie Freeman. Mr. Freeman, you might be on mute. There you go.
Okay, I'm Willie Freeman. I'm a police commissioner appointee and hail from Brooklyn.
Great. Thank you. Thank you all. With the holidays and the end of the year fast approaching, the CCRB is having year-end conversations with our staff and our partners in city government. One such conversation was a meeting I, along with my colleagues Eric Bond and Michael Rivadeneira, had with the police department. In this meeting, I stressed the department's rate of agreement with our disciplinary recommendations is too low. And it is unfortunate that this concurrent rate continues to decrease. Ultimately, I believe the department should give deference to CCRB's decisions, and at a minimum, the police commissioner should not downgrade any pleas reached between CCRB attorneys and attorneys representing the subject officers. I also stressed to the department that the CCRB needs direct access to body-worn camera footage. While the department has done a good job of clearing the backlog of body-worn camera requests, I believe direct access is the most transparent and efficient way for our investigators to access this body-worn camera footage. Finally, I spoke with department leadership about concerns raised in these meetings about retaliation for filing CCRB complaints. Although retaliation is hard to quantify, since the individuals fearing retaliation are not filing complaints, we have seen complaints withdrawn because of fear of retaliation. This is an issue we will continue to work on internally and with the department to ensure New Yorkers' rights to file a complaint with our agency are not infringed upon. These are just a few items that the CCRB will be monitoring and working on next year. For more, I'd like to take a moment and let board members Erica Bond and Michael Rivadeneira share what they raised with the department. Erica, please, let's start with you.
Great. Thank you, Chair Davey. I do really appreciate the opportunity to represent the board at these meetings with NYPD, and I think it's essential that we are included in these conversations about the future of policing in New York City. As Chair Davey noted, we felt it was important to raise a number of issues with the department at this meeting. And on behalf of the board, I raised a couple of issues that we'd like to see addressed that I think will both aid our work and better address community member needs. The first issue is with respect to disciplinary history. Currently, we only have access to CCRB disciplinary history, and we don't have an understanding of whether and how an officer has been disciplined by the department for issues that have not come before the CCRB, and I believe that knowing an officer's full history is really important for us when we're contemplating whether to recommend discipline and particularly the level of discipline. And it's also particularly important that we get this information right now because NYPD is getting ready to implement a disciplinary matrix that takes into consideration an officer's disciplinary history. So it is, to Chair Davies' point, it's going to be even harder, I think, to align NYPD's discipline and what they impose and what we recommend if we don't have access to disciplinary history information that is going to feed into the disciplinary recommendation, into the disciplinary matrix. So we feel it's really important that we have access to this information, and we requested that the department provide that access to us moving forward. The second issue that I touched on was with respect to NYPD and officer interactions with people experiencing mental health crisis. I think as everyone on this board knows, a substantial number of our cases involve people that are in crisis or have mental health issues of some kind. And so what we communicated to the NYPD is that while it's encouraging that the city is launching a pilot program in a few precincts that will send mental health teams instead of officers as the first line response to folks in crisis, we really do believe this program needs to be expanded and expanded rapidly, and that we think reducing contact between officers and people in crisis will really be better for the community, and it will also lower misconduct complaints, and like I said, of which we get very many that are related to these kinds of interactions. So again, thank you, Chair Davey, for including me in that meeting, and with that, I'll turn it over to Board Member Michael Rivadeneira.
Thank you, Erica. So thank you, Chair Davey, also for including me in this conversation. I definitely want to echo what Erica had said in terms of the need for CCRB to be part of these conversations, since we do have these public meetings and hear from the public about various different encounters with the police and sort of recommendations from the public. So it was good to be part of the conversation. So I touched on two topics with the police in the conversation. The first topic being how the department handles interactions with our youth. Definitely shared that we were encouraged that the department adopted the recommendations from the youth report that we released over the summer. However, we still hear from the public that NYPD and young people, when they're have an encounter, they escalate unnecessarily. And so we stress the fact that, we feel that there should be more training. Training should not be just limited to the youth coordinating officers. It should be broader throughout the department. We recognize the fact that the department, they are not in the youth development sphere, but we definitely know that these are problems that we need to address. We don't want to have these escalation issues occur because unfortunately they can go pretty badly pretty quickly. The other issue that I brought up was, the protests engagement that we saw. We all saw how public this was, how the department handled protests, and we wanted to have a conversation about that. Not just over the summer, but moving forward, how will the department look at their tactics when it comes to handling protest matters? We shared that we had concerns on our ability to identify officers that may have committed misconduct because they were either covering their badge numbers or failed to turn on their body-worn cameras. So that has made it challenging for us to do our investigations, and we want to have the department understand that we need their assistance to hold officers accountable for any misconduct that may have occurred over the summer, and we hope that they can help ensure that we're able to do thorough investigations based on those incidents that have been reported to us. So again, I thank Chair Davey for including me in the conversation, and I return to the chair.
Well, thank you both, and I appreciate your taking your time out of your day to join in these conversations with the department about issues that the CCRB believes are critically important to our ongoing effective functioning and especially our relationship with the NYPD. So thank you both again. Another recent year-end conversation that CCRB staff participated in, speaking of youth, as Board Member Riva Denera just did, was in a youth-led conversation our Youth Advisory Council convened with the NYPD. In this conversation, many young people raised a lot of issues their older counterparts have been raising. Concerns about the use of military-grade equipment by the police, the need to reallocate resources from the department and into social services, the need for ongoing positive, honest engagement between police and young people to build trust between police and the communities they serve. From this conversation, it was clear that our young people are listening to the conversations we are having about policing in America today. It's important that we give these young people the time and space to have their own conversations and to prioritize what they have to say as well. Finally, as we enter into what is expected to be a tough winter for our city, as COVID cases are rising. I want to take a moment to thank all of our essential workers, that includes members of the NYPD, for keeping us safe and healthy during this crisis. I also want to thank the CCRB staff for doing this work every day, particularly during such a hard year as 2020 has been. And then I want to thank all of you for being here tonight. Your participation in this process this year and every year is essential to the CCRB's work. With that, I will turn it over to our Executive Director, CCRB Executive Director, John Dosh, who has a few words if he'd like to share with us. John.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and thank you all for attending. Last month, the CCRB proposed new rules that will enable us to investigate sexual misconduct, false official statements made about civilians by NYPD officers in official proceedings or on official paperwork. We republished those proposed rules for public comment on Monday. And if you have not yet had a chance to make your voice heard on these rules, you now have more time. You can submit a comment online or by mail, and our staff is going to put up a link in the WebEx chat with more information on how to do that. The CCRB will be taking public comment on the new rules at our January 13th board meeting, and you can reserve time to comment on the rules either for the January board meeting or send us something in writing. Finally, the CCRB is going to be convening a panel of oversight agencies for discussion on potential police reforms in New York City. The panel discussion is being convened in response to Governor Cuomo's Executive Order 203. Other discussions have been happening across the city based on that executive order, such as the one that Chair Davey and board members Bond and Rivadeneira discussed earlier. That executive order requires each local government in New York State to adopt a policing reform plan that's going to maintain public safety, build public trust between police and the communities they serve. Our panel discussion is going to hopefully inform the city's response to that executive order. And I'm excited that it's going to be very informative for everyone, and I urge you all to tune in. Just to give an update on the status of remote CCRB operations, as the COVID-19 situation gets worse, the health of complainants, staff, and members of service remains a priority and informs all of our operations. I strongly encourage individuals to contact us by telephone, email, or website if possible. And to file a complaint, you can go to nyc.gov/CCRB complaint or call us at 1-800-341-2272. Investigators are now able to conduct their work, including interviewing civilians and members of the NYPD remotely. And now, finally, for public comment, please use the raise your hand feature if you'd like to make a comment. To discuss a problematic encounter with a police officer, please provide us with contact information so that our investigators can follow up with you. And if you could reserve questions and comments unrelated to presentations for the public session. And I want to thank our staff for all their work on the continuing operations, and thanks again to the members of the public for participating in this hearing.
Thank you, Executive Director Dar. So let me see if any of the board members have any questions or comments about any of the remarks that have been made so far. All right, hearing none, we will turn to our Outreach Director, CCRB's Outreach Director, Jahai Rose. I'm sorry, he's the Deputy Director of Outreach. I just promoted you, Jahai. Deputy Director of Outreach and Intergovernmental Affairs, Jahai.
Thank you so much, Mr. Davey. Thank you, everyone, for attending our meeting today. Can everyone see my screen?
Yes, we can see it.
The Civilian Complaint Review Board is the nation's largest oversight body over the largest police department, the largest police force in the nation. The CCRB investigates, mediates, and prosecutes complaints of misconduct against members of the New York City Police Department. You've met some of our board members today. Our agency is governed by a 15-member board, with 5 seats being appointed by the mayor, 5 appointed by the New York City Council, 3 designated by the police commissioner, and 1 appointed by the New York City Public Advocate. The chair, who you've met, Chair Davey, is jointly appointed by the mayor and the city council. The Civilian Complaint Review Board investigates allegations of misconduct. However, we do not investigate all allegations of misconduct. A way to remember this is a easy acronym called FATO. FATO stands for force, abuse of authority, discourtesy, and offensive language. I wanted to provide you with a little bit of information regarding the Right to Know Act. The Right to Know Act is a law that was passed, that was enacted in October 19th of 2018. This law notifies police officers that they must identify themselves when by providing their name and information such as rank, command, and shield number. In some instances, they must explain the purpose of the encounter or the interaction. They should inform individuals of their right to say no when asking for consent to search an individual's person, property, vehicle, or home. And they should offer a business card with the police officer's information that explains how a comment or complaint can be made about an interaction with an NYPD officer. And civilians can request these business cards in all interactions. This is a copy of what the business card may look like. Now, there are a few ways to make a complaint about police misconduct. One was mentioned by an executive director, Jonathan Darsh. That includes the website, which is nyc.gov/CCRB complaints. You can also call the CCRB at 1-800-341-CCRB. Remember, if you see footage of misconduct on social media or in the news, you can file a complaint, even if you are not in person. Additional ways to file a complaint about misconduct to our agency is by calling 311. You can also visit our local office, and you could also send a letter to the Civilian Complaint Review Board. You also have an ability to go to a local police precinct and make a complaint in person there as well. You could visit our office at 100 Church Street on the 10th floor. That's in New York, zip code 10007. If you'd like to request an outreach presentation, you could feel free to reach us at outreach@ccrb.nyc.gov. You can also follow the CCRB on social media on Instagram, Twitter, and Facebook. Thank you very much, Chair Davey.
Thank you, Jahai. Let me see if our board members have any questions for Jahai. All right, hearing none, we will now go to our public comment section of the meeting. I want to remind those who would like to comment to use the raise your hand feature that is a part of this WebEx function here. So use the raise your hand feature. I also want to remind anyone who speaks that you have 2 minutes to speak, and we hope you will keep your comments to 2 minutes so that we can get to as many speakers as possible. So I will turn it to Yahira to see if we have anyone in the queue who would like to speak.
Thank you, Chair Davey. First, we'll be hearing from Chris Dunn, and while Soren upgrades his features, just want to acknowledge that Latoya LeGrand from State Senator Comrie's office is here, as well as Isabel Chandler from Councilmember Carlina Rivera's office. Chris?
Hello, can you hear me?
Yes, we can.
Okay. Hi there, Fred. Hello, everybody. So thank you very much. Fred, I had a couple questions. I'm hoping the answers won't count against my time, but here are the questions. First, thank you for describing the meeting. That sounds like an important meeting. Can you tell us who from the department was there? And we heard a lot about what you raised, which sounds quite important, but we didn't hear anything about what the department had to say. I think people would like to hear about that.
Okay, I'm going to ask my fellow board members to help me with this, as well as John. I know that Deputy Commissioner Schwenger was there. Chief Antilles was there on the department side. And then from the Committee on Reform, we had Jennifer Jones also. Am I missing anybody? Erica, John, or Michael?
Wasn't Chief Madre also there?
Chief Madry was also there. You're absolutely right. Chief Jeff Madry, who is the chief for, I think, community affairs, community relations.
Do they have anything interesting to disclose, or did they just listen to what you had to say?
It was, I would say they mostly listened. I think that Ms. Jones Austin was probably the most engaged with us. She asked lots of questions of the department. I think when it comes to the issue of retaliation that we raised, she did not, I mean, I indicated that they did not have a lot of evidence they had not been hearing a lot about retaliation. I tried to make the point that we were raising it as something that we were hearing on a more consistent basis, and that it was important for us all to pay attention to it. But let me turn to Michael and Erica and John and see if they want to comment.
So I think Deputy Commissioner Litwin was also there, and I think is it Deputy Commissioner Parker, Chauncey Parker?
Chauncey Parker is a deputy commissioner. That's exactly right.
So they were also there, Fred.
Any other piece you want to add to this, John?
I think they mostly listened, and they I think that the facilitator who was there really tried to get us to get real with her and like be upfront about what the challenges in the relationship were, and I thought that was helpful. By the
facilitator, you mean Jennifer Jones Austin?
Yes. And I thought it made for a more productive engagement by both sides.
Erica, Mike, anything to add?
I don't think so. I think, Chris, my sense is that this was mostly intended for NYPD to gather information as they're doing this with a number of different entities on a whole variety of issues. And I would expect there'll be more conversations. And certainly I think we will push additional conversations on the issues that we care about. I think there was some interesting conversation about the extent to which the department looks systematically at the recommendations that we make and the rates of agreement and whether there's more that can be done for the department at a sort of systems level to think about what civilian complaints can tell them about what interactions with the community look like, as opposed to just treating these as kind of one-off cases that need to be responded to with specific discipline, because there's sort of two levels of utility for our work. One is getting justice in particular cases, but the other is in thinking about whether there are broader issues that the cases as a whole reflect in terms of the way that PD is interacting with communities. And so I thought that was a particularly useful part of the conversation.
Thank you. Michael, anything?
I mean, I'll just, echo the fact that it was more of an information gathering. But what was helpful was to actually share the information that we received from the community at various meetings, especially the fact that, which I think was received well by CAU in regards to like how are they spaces beyond just having spaces for adults to come in and share their opinions of police interaction, sort of like the police precinct councils or the Build It Back program that they're running, that the NCOs are doing. So it's something encouraging that they wanted to learn about that and sort of see, you know, where are areas that can grow and expand the ICO initiative, and, you know, definitely sharing the fact that they need to create spaces where young people can come into, because there's that breach of trust. And so it was good to at least have that conversation with them. But other than that, it was more of an information gathering exercise.
Thank you, Mike.
Okay, thank you. It's hard to get Jeff and Matt to say anything, but okay, I hear what you're saying. And then I did have another question, and I have something nice I want to say, but before I get to that, I do have a question about something we have complained about in the past, so I'll ask you about, John. Seems like you guys have actually done a remarkable job in trying to keep your investigations going in the face of the pandemic. And I'm encouraged that you are now allowing complainants to participate remotely. Are you thinking about making that permanent? Because we have long complained and thought it was a huge driver of your truncation rate, that people had to come be interviewed in person. And is there a contemplation, and I apologize if this has been announced, but are you guys thinking about making the remote option a permanent option?
It's something we're discussing and is on the table.
Okay, I want to nail that thing to the table because it would be an important reform. It's a new day.
Understood.
Okay, so here's a nice thing I want to say. From my perspective, the two biggest things that happened this year for purposes of policing, your role in policing, involves the violence by the NYPD at the George Floyd protests we saw throughout the year, or at least since May. And the second was the repeal of 50A. And I think it still very, very much remains to be seen where your work lands with respect to the complaints that you got around the protests. And I don't think I've seen a recent number, but I know very early on you had hundreds of complaints. I encourage you ultimately to do a report of those complaints as a group. But what I want to talk about is the repeal of 50A. This was a seminal change. New York State, New York City, including the mayor's office and the police department, were fighting on 50A. The one city agency that I think was doing the right thing on 50A, for the most part, was the CCRB. And Fred, I note in particular that you were publicly speaking about the repeal of 50A at a time when I don't think you were in line with the mayor's office, and I give you enormous credit for that. And I give the board credit for supporting you, and I'm assuming they supported you. I'll set aside the police commissioner reps. And so I note that. And then I also note that right out of the box, as soon as 50A was repealed, CCRB did extraordinary work, I think, in honoring both the letter and the spirit of the repeal. And to my knowledge, it's the only city agency that has done that. And to be sure, there's been a lot of litigation around that. And that litigation is ongoing. But I want to acknowledge here, and it's not my business to be singing the praises of New York City agencies in general or the CCRB in particular, but I want to sing the praises of the CCRB on this point. You guys did the right thing on 50A. We appreciate that. I think the public appreciates that greatly. And once the litigation is over, I look forward to your continuing to do the right thing, even if other agencies are going to have to be dragged kicking and screaming. So instead of leaving a lump of coal in your stockings for the holidays, I want to say thank you for that. And then I want to close with one final question.
Sure.
Unless you guys want to say you're welcome.
I said thank you.
Okay. And I don't know if you want to address this, and it's a personnel matter, but I just feel like it should, if you want an opportunity to address it, I want to give you the opportunity. There was significant reporting about some employees who were dismissed and allegations that they were dismissed in retaliation for criticisms they had made internally about the agency's position vis-a-vis the police department. Every member of the public, people in the public who have been paying attention to CCRB will have all read about this and know about it. And oftentimes voices don't get to be heard in this conversation. So I just want to say, if the board wants to address that, I know members of the public would be interested in hearing what you have to say.
Thanks, Chris. So let me just say a word about that. It's inappropriate to discuss details of personnel matters in a public forum like this. I will say unequivocally that no one was in this restructuring engaged in any kind of negative way because of any comments they might have had to say about the ways in which the board and the staff engages the department. That I can say unequivocally. I think the statement has been pretty clear. The agency did some reorganizing in order to be able to do some other things that we want to do, including hiring additional investigators so that we could deal with the cases that we have before us. But I think that's as much as I think it's appropriate to say in public about an HR issue. Let me see if any of the other board members have comments or questions on this, or staff. Okay. Hearing none, thanks again, Chris. Thank you for your compliment. We'll take it. The only thing I'd say in regard to that is it's always going to be, our task to serve this agency and its mission as best we can. And I probably should have acknowledged in my remarks the passing of Mayor David Dinkins, who gave us this Civilian Complaint Review Board in its current form at much political cost. And if for no other reason, upholding his memory and giving appropriate due to what he accomplished, I, as chair, and I think I can speak for some, if not all of my co-board members, we will do everything we can to make sure this agency lives up to its mission. So thanks again. Yahira, any other public speakers?
Yes, next we'll be hearing from Diane Banks, and while Soren is queuing her up, we'd just like to announce Councilmember Rosenthal's office, and just wondering if the office would like to say hello or anything.
Thank you. I'm in the middle of eating lunch. No, I'm listening. I'm here to listen today. I think I'll be testifying at your next meeting. Thank you, as always, for the work that you do. I'm going to go back to eating now.
Thank you. Next time, bring some for the rest of the morning. But thank you.
Buen provecho, Councilmember Rosenthal. Thank you for coming. Diane?
Okay. Hi, good afternoon, everybody. My name is Dr. Diane Price Banks. I just have 3 questions. The first question, I did put in the question and answer chat, so I'll just read that. I said, could training for police include better de-escalating protocols, and how do we walk and how to walk away as opposed to being arrogant and authoritative? The second question I have is for CCRB, and I wanted to know, what are you guys doing to basically try to get teeth in the agency? I asked that because this goes into my third question. There was several CCRB complaints that I filed, and the police actually taunted me to file the complaint. And then once I filed the complaint, nothing happened after that. CCRB was not able to report to me in terms of what disciplinary actions took place. So that was the third question. How could members of the community find out what disciplinary actions took place that specifically relates to a complaint that the constituent files? So there's 3 questions I'm asking. Again, the first question is, could training for police include better de-escalating protocols and how to walk away as opposed to being arrogant and authoritative? The second question is, what is CCRB doing to improve the teeth in the agency? And the third question is, how could the public who file for complaints be informed in terms of what's going on with those complaints and the disciplinary action that ensued? Thank you for your time.
Thank you. Let me just address the CCRB and teeth question, and then I'll turn it to John and maybe others who want to address the training question and in the issue of sharing information with the public about dispositions of complaints. As I think I said in my remarks about the conversation that we had with the department and with the committee for reform, the issue of final authority on disciplinary matters is a big one, because at the end of the day, the police commissioner has the right to accept, reject, or modify any disciplinary recommendation that this board makes. And we are working really, really hard to get closer concurrence between what we recommend and what the department ultimately does. It's problematic at the moment, but we are engaged in conversations and actions to try to improve that. There's some thought that with this new disciplinary matrix that the police department is developing, if we align that with the CCRB's disciplinary framework, we'll get closer concurrence. And I actually hope that works and hope it's actually true. But I think as long as we have a department that has this kind of authority to make the ultimate decision about discipline, that we run the risk of having the public wonder whether or not the agency has the type of authority it should have in terms of what happens when it comes to discipline as it relates to officers. So that's an ongoing conversation. But let me see if there are any comments on training and de-escalation or on making information public. John, you want to address some of that?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. So I'm going to tackle the disposition question first, if that's okay with you, Chair.
Yes, please.
So the agency has been criticized in the past for the letters we send to people explaining the outcomes of the case being very tough to read and not providing information to people that is useful to them. In fact, there was a criticism of that in the last board meeting. The agency, in an effort led by Harriet Terrican, our senior counsel to the executive director, is looking at all of our communications with civilians, but especially the disposition letters, to make sure that A, they are accurate, and B, they are written in a way that is easy to understand and conveys information that people need in a way that they can readily understand it. And we're working with advocacy groups in the city to make sure that it's not just our opinion of what we think people need to know, and it's in a language that people can easily understand, but that the groups that are out there fighting for people to get that information think that as well. And so it is an ongoing process right now, and it is going to be a multi-step process because some of the letters are so important and need to be improved so quickly that we may make some quick changes and then revisit them later to fine-tune them. And with regard to training, I apologize, Ms. Bond, if I am going to steal what you were going to say, but one of the things that she brought up in the meeting with the facilitator in the NYPD was that the board needs discipline information on what one of the reasons we need that information is if an officer receives training, we need to know what that training was so that we can determine if it was effective. Because if an officer receives training and then has a similar issue subsequently, that's one way of, you could look at it that the officer has major problems, or you could look and say, well, maybe that training isn't that effective. And so that is a data point that that the board feels it needs. So I apologize, Erica, for stealing your thunder.
No offense taken. I don't know if you addressed this, but my understanding is that much of the department has received de-escalation training, and that there is an effort made to train officers on de-escalation. But to John's point, it's, we don't yet know what the impact of that training is, which is part of why it's important that we get not just information about whether the department has imposed discipline and even whether it's imposed training, but the specific type of training, so that hopefully we can be helpful in assessing whether that training is addressing whatever the underlying misconduct is. The only thing I would add here is that it sounds like the speaker had specific cases that she wasn't aware of how they were resolved, and so I don't think we should do that in a public forum, but I would just encourage her to reach out. I'm going to volunteer you, John, to
reach out to her in the chat and get her information, and then we'll get her what she needs.
Okay, great. Yeah, I just want to make sure that we circle back because it sounds like there were specific cases here. So, and thank you to the participant for raising these issues with us.
Indeed, thank you. Anybody else? Any other board member want to comment, reflect on this? All right, thank you. I'm sorry, Joseph?
Yes. It's a question for John. This issue of the disposition letters, I think it's great that we have Haria and the team looking at how we can make them better. It's been a concern of mine, for as long as I've been on the board. And I know that at one point 50A was affecting the information that was appearing or not appearing on the letters. Is there anything, now that 50A is repealed, is there an impact of that is on the disposition letters foreseen?
Yes.
Great.
For the better, I assume.
Yes.
Excellent.
Thank you, Mr. Puma. Anything else? Anyone else on this? All right. Our next speaker, Yahara.
Thanks again, Diane. Next, we'll be hearing from Sean Abbott.
Hello, my name is Sean Abbott. Can you all hear me?
Yes, we can.
Okay, good. Excellent. Thank you. So I'm going to commence with a quotation from Confucius, apropos of what was just being discussed, which is people are very confused about the language they receive in response to their reasonable complaints. Confucius says, if language is not used rightly, then what is said is not what is meant. If what is said is not what is meant, then that which ought to be done is left undone. Justice will go awry, and if justice goes awry, the people will stand about in helpless confusion. Now, I said at the October meeting that the people will not stand about in helpless confusion. They will rise up in anger. And one reason to be angry as a civilian is this question on the intake form. So if you have a problem with a cop, you go to the intake form at CCRB and it asks you this question on the third page: to thoroughly investigate your incident, the CCRB might need to obtain body-worn camera video from the NYPD, including video that is related to a sealed case or may otherwise require your permission before it can be lawfully disclosed. Do you consent to the CCRB getting access to these videos to do its investigation? There is an asterisk which goes nowhere. And then there are two bubbles, a bubble that says yes and a bubble that says no. I have an active complaint against officers of the 33rd Precinct in Manhattan. I checked no. I checked no. And as a consequence of my conversations with two CCRB investigators, I found out that this language, to thoroughly investigate your incident, what I just said, doesn't mean what any reasonable person would expect it to mean, especially given the yes-no check. I said, no, I'm not interested in finding out what these officers did so loathsomely, so aggressively with their body cameras. Excuse me, it was just one officer, although I'm not sure what the other officer was doing that night. I have this to say very clearly. I am asking the board to overrule Jonathan Darsh's a determination to me in an October 22 email. After reviewing your case, I determined that it is unsuitable for mediation. That's not why I was contacting the CCRB board. I was contacting the CCRB board to complain about this language, which is so obscurely written. It had nothing to do with my full participation as a civilian in the workings of the CCRB. I want mediation with these officers at the 33rd Precinct. Now, because I have done this insanely, brought my concerns about this legal language to the board, Jonathan Darsh has said, after reviewing your case, I determined that it is unsuitable for mediation. He also adds later in this email, the reason that there is not more definite language used in the waiver is because there may be cases where there is a dispute between the CCRB and NYPD as to whether a waiver is necessary. Well, I'm sorry, but it does not say that on the intake form as a civilian when you go there to say, I have been abused by the police tonight. I want to close by saying that hashtag defund the police is a political disaster. It has lost people elections all across the continent. I say hashtag reserve the police. I am not someone who disrespects the police. I believe that the police have an important role in our community and in my community. But when I walk my dog by the same corner every single night and I see cops parked from the 33rd or from who knows where, parked in their car with the windows rolled up and the engine on and hearing nothing and seeing nothing and scrolling porn on their iPhones, I know one thing. Hashtag defund the police makes more sense. It makes a lot of sense. But here's what I want from this. I want the board to overrule Jonathan Darsh in his saying, after reviewing your case, I determined that it is unsuitable for mediation. I want to talk to those cops that I had that confrontation with that night, who were scrolling porn on their phone, and I knocked on the window and I said, you know, I walk by this corner every night at this time, and you guys are never looking out for my best interests.
Thank you, sir. We get the point, and we hear what you're saying. We appreciate your coming to the public, and we'll have a conversation with Mr. Darsh and see how
Mr. Darsh said that he reported he reported this to the executive session of the November 9th board meeting. So what was the result?
Thank you, Speaker. I'll have a conversation with him, and we'll be back in touch with you. Thank you. Yahira, for our next speaker.
Thank you, Sean. I want to remind everyone to keep comments to 2 minutes. Next, we'll be hearing from John Sonda.
In regards to reviewing reopening requests, Executive Director Dar stated, generally, I don't review the audio recordings of the telephone conversations between the investigator and the person who filed the complaint, although sometimes I do. Executive Director Dar, since not all audio recordings are reviewed, not all reviews of reopening requests are treated equally with the same due diligence and procedures. Is that correct?
Johnny.
So some reopen requests are simpler than other requests, and so I deal with them in different ways.
Okay, so how do you decide which audio recordings to review? Do you have a criteria to determine which audio recordings are more deserving of being reviewed?
Yes, I look at the request and I look at the recommendation from the squad leader who is initially doing the evaluation of the request. And if the squad leader, if I disagree with the squad leader's decision recommendation, I generally go and listen to the audio recordings and look deeper into the case before I decide to reverse the squad leader's recommendation.
Okay, but if a person files a complaint and they provide video evidence of police misconduct with their written reopening request, does the executive director generally review the video evidence or always reviews the video evidence?
No, I don't always review the evidence that's submitted because I don't always need to.
Even video evidence?
I don't always need to review the evidence to make a decision on a reopening request.
And what would that be?
So Sonda, what's your point?
No, I'm just asking for an answer. That's my point.
I think he gave you an answer.
I didn't understand.
You may not agree with it, but you got an answer.
Okay.
Do you have another point you want to make?
Yes. When was it determined that two co-chief of investigations as well as a deputy chief of investigations was redundant?
That's a question I don't think we need to answer here. And do you have another question?
Where's you said you can't answer it here. Where's a place that you can answer it?
We'll have it. We'll have it in the executive session where it belongs. Do you have another question?
Yes. The agency's rules allow the chair or a panel to review reopening requests in addition to the executive director. But at last month's board meeting, the executive director said I reviewed the reopening request. First, are you aware of what the original intent was to allow the chair, a panel, or the executive director to review the reopening request and not just consolidate the review process under the authority?
Mr. Sonda, do you mind if I discuss your case for 1 second? Because I can give you a direct answer. I just don't know if you'll like the answer.
I'm trying to get a general answer to my question here.
So Mr. Sonda, are you giving me permission to discuss your case?
Let me take a stab at this. If you're trying to ask a question about where the authority lies, it lies with the board and staff on any number of these issues. Sonda, I understand that you're not satisfied with how your situation was resolved, and I can appreciate the frustration. But taking up the public's time at every board meeting because your case was not resolved to your satisfaction is not the way to deal with this. And it's not fair to the general public, and it's certainly not fair, to people who show up here really wanting to get their concerns before the board. We've heard you. You're unhappy with the process. It's not a perfect process, and we're not perfect people. But what we've given you is what we believe right now is the most appropriate and the best that this agency can provide you. I'm sorry that that's not good enough, but you shouldn't come to these meetings every month and take up this amount of time because your personal situation was not resolved to your satisfaction. It's just not right and it's not fair. I'm going to give you a chance for one more question, and then we're going to have to move on.
What reasons do you suppose that might be beneficial that the chair or panel also be allowed to review reopening requests?
We can all, the board and the senior staff have the right to review the reopening of a case upon request. And the board has the confidence that if there's a substantive issue that requires a reopening of the case, then we will hear from our executive staff about the need to do that. If that, and if we ever lose that confidence, then we'll have another executive staff. So thank you, sir, for your comments and your questions. And again, I'm sorry that things have not evolved as you would have liked them, but sometimes life is just like that. So thank you. Yahira, can we have the next speaker, please?
Thank you, Mr. Sonda. That concludes the public session for today.
Thank you. Any comments any questions from any of the board members before we move to see if there's any old business? Anyone? And I can't see the full screen, so if you have something you'd like to say, I'm going to pause and give you a chance to come in. All right. Is there any old business to come before the board? Any new business to come before the board? Hearing none, is there a motion that we adjourn to executive session? Is there such a motion?
So moved.
Is there a second?
Second.
Second.
All those in favor of adjourning to executive session, please say aye.
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 Those opposed, no. The ayes have it. We are adjourned to executive session. Thank you all. Thanks to the public. Thanks everybody for coming out tonight, and we will see you next month, if not before.